Thank you for tuning in to the World Builders Anvil, episode 237. Today's topic, an interview with an old friend.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build.
So yeah, when we're talking about like theme and how I pick up the theme, it's I'll start with something that I want to do, and then I really want to let the players shape the theme of the world, and you know, there's a little bit of a feeling out period there. To see what players want to do. It's easier when it's a one-on-one scenario. Like with you, we got there really fast, which was great because you know, I didn't have to worry about how your apparent desire to lose a lot would conflict with other people's desire probably not to lose a lot. So that was
it's funny that you should say that should be coming out, because I of course never looked at it that way. For me, I've always been a slave or service to story. So when I'm playing a game, I don't care if my character wins or loses as long as the story comes out well. And Jeff and I have had tons of conversations about this before, and other games that we've done where there is this give and take quite directly with the player, me, and the game master, whether it be you, Jim, or you, Jeff, where like we're setting it up not totally beforehand, but like a little. Like I'll be like, all right, you know, like these sort of things, like if you'll give me this concession, then I'll totally like we had a character in another campaign where Jeff was kind enough to allow me some pretty significant power, but in service that he literally killed my character so that my character could be resurrected. Yeah. So, but only in service of making a fantastic set piece for the other characters. We created we created these great moments, and it was beyond my character's power level. But Jeff granted it to me for the purpose of creating this great moment.
Yeah.
And we definitely had things like that in the campaign that you and I did in the Mage campaign, where I'm like, that's okay, just, you know, do this, hurt me, or, you know, like that's fine. So, but we were also like, you know, that was probably the most within the system of the game, one of the more powerful characters I've ever played, because you were giving me like 2, 3, 5 character points every session, and we were playing. So my character was growing in sphere power very rapidly, but at the same time, you kept throwing bigger and bigger threats at me. So the character never felt like he was super strong, even though by comparison to any other character in Mage I've ever played, he was very strong.
Oh yeah.
So I think one of the great lessons from this, though, is like, and it's easier when you're creating a tabletop game where you know the people who are going to be at the table, because you can really, you know, you and I think Jim will agree with me, you're picking themes that will interest and propel them to play your story.
And
that's one of the things that you think about when you're designing it, which is really simple when you're doing it for, well, I don't say it because especially if it's a larger table and you have different players, it's not always so simple, but you really know what you have to work with, you know. But like when you start going beyond a table and you're making a scenario to be played by other people and people you might not know, or you start going to novel or a game, it's really core important that you know who you're telling your story to, because you can't fulfill that in everyone with a singular story experience, a singular interaction with the world. So you have to make it in a way where it really focuses in on people, and you're creating themes for a certain number of people that probably you enjoy making.
Yeah. When so on the video game making side of my life, this kind of thing comes up all the time, right? So knowing what your audience is, and knowing your target audience, and who you're making a game for. We used to get early on. I would ask this question, and sometimes I'd get somebody in sales and marketing telling me, like, "Oh, your audience is everybody," and I'd be like, "Well, that means it's for nobody."
That's right.
Because
I hate to say that's not a good marketer, but that's just my opinion.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. I won't comment on that. So you're not gonna. The video is not made public, right?
No,
so,
the video is not made public.
Perfect. But yeah, so it's that thing, and so you have to know, like you nothing is going to make everybody happy. People are not the same. There is no one size fits all. And if you attempt to please too many people, you end up with what I was always calling, like, you end up in the mushy middle, where people are like, well, we need a bunch of action moments, and people are like, yeah, but we need a bunch of like quiet, like story moments, and you're like, oh, well, okay, we can do those. Yeah, we can intersperse these, but as everybody keeps saying, like, no, we need more action, we need more quiet moments, then you end up saying, like, well, now they're overlapping, and now our action moments have to be quiet, and our quiet moments have to be actiony, and now we don't have any action or quiet, and we're just in this mushy middle where we're just making something that's mediocre, because we're trying too hard to make something for everybody. It's just not a good thing. So when you are working with a group of people that you can really tailor some interesting things, and you can have those moments, and like knowing who your audience is, when you're in like a tabletop setting, like I know these 6 people who are going to be playing, I know what they want, I'm going to make something that tries to satisfy when I make a Venn diagram of that, I'm going to try to sort of make that match, but I can modify it live and try to tailor it to them. This is why, like, if you're trying to like run a game with 20 people in it, like, those things don't work well. Forget the logistics of it, but the different things that people want when you get 20 of them, together, it just makes it very hard to like focus on what something is. And so your game will be everywhere. When you're making something with an unknown audience, like you literally don't know like who the people are going to be, you have to just target, some concept of an audience. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I'm going to make this game for people who love, technical melee combat, and are like really interested in like warfare, like not just fighting in the streets, but like how armies move, and specifically like infantry. And that's what this is about. That's what this game is gonna be about. As far as like that combat goes, that's what it is. And then what I'm gonna build story-wise around it, these are gonna be stories that all directly tie to being infantry in, during a war, with the combat happening all the time. Like, those are the stories that are going to get told, and that's how the characters are going to relate to each other. And the people outside of that world are going to relate to them on those terms. So they'll get, care packages sent from the home front, or, whatever that happens to be. You just have to pick what that is and focus on it and try to make it, and just, hope you haven't focused too narrowly if you're trying to get something that's widely popular. But if you're just making something that you want to be good and to be quality and to be loved by a target audience, like there's, you don't have to go broad. You can go very, very narrow, very specific. There's a video game designer who makes these very niche games. They're basically they're programming games. They're video games that appeal to programmers. And one thing that I had never learned to program was assembly language, and it's something that I was kind of interested in. And I saw this game that was this like perversely designed, like it was supposed to be this like computer from the 80s, but it was this like perversely designed computer from the 80s with very limited resources, but like multiple CPUs that could all run in parallel. And had this assembly language there, and basically the whole game is take this data and get this output, take this input and get this output by programming this bizarre computer.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, yeah, that's worth paying money for. So I was like, sure, I'll pay $10 for that game, or $15 for that game. And that company, they've continued on that. They continue to make these like niche products that are really focused on people who like this kind of thing. And yes, they've stepped up some of the production values, and lately they have things that are more graphic, because the very first one is super stripped down. And they made sort of sequels that are also programming games that have been more sort of visual. One sort of told a story about how you have traveled abroad to go work at a company making crappy electronic products for mass market, like super cheap, crappy electronics. That's the game. And that company has been successful because it has done this very narrow focus. And they're okay with being very niche, very specific, very micro.
They didn't happen to make the game Data Wing.
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, I can tell you who it is. So the company I'm talking about is Zachtronics.
Not familiar.
Yeah. They've had a few games. Do you know Minecraft?
I know Minecraft. I've heard of that once or twice.
So Minecraft, yeah. Minecraft is sort of based on a game, kind of based. I don't want to get too much into that and like what the true provenance of Minecraft is, but Minecraft is sort of based on a game called Infiniminer, and Infiniminer is a game made by Zachtronics, or what is now Zachtronics.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not where they go with it now. They make these little programming games, and they're very cool. And some of them are very stylish. They're basically puzzle games, but they have some very dense, almost inaccessible games that they make. The assembly language one is one, and but they're successful because they know the they know the audience. They don't mind knowing the audience. Yeah, and they know what they're shooting for. And they just make sure that they're serving that audience well, and so the product is very good, which is kind of nice.
So I got one more. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask for the audience here. So we have a lot of people who world build.
Yeah.
So for world builders who want to go into video games, are there good paths for world builders who want to go into video games? Because I know it's maybe a bit different. But I guess in every way, every game is its own world. So,
sure, yeah, no, okay. So, yeah, world building for video games. Yeah, I would say world building means a few things in the context of video games. Sometimes it's literally building, like it's what's called level design, right? Or environmental design or art. I think in this context where we're talking about story and theme and that kind of creativity, that kind of the higher level stuff, there's a few things you can do. One, there are games you can mod that are out there. The Elder Scrolls games tend to, if you have a copy of them at least on Windows, they tend to have a good tool set that lets you go in and create content inside an existing world. But you can create a campaign or a scenario inside a game like that. create brand new characters and have story arcs and artifacts and things like that, and your own sense of lore. Having something that you can get in there and actually build and share with people can be very helpful. One, it lets you kind of see what you're up against, because it's not, games isn't just about creativity. Games is this creativity of this. It's about creativity and technology. It's about this mashup of the creative and the technical. And so one thing that would help people who want to get into video games is to actually get a little bit of practical experience doing it, so that they just have a better sense of what it actually is. Like if you were to say, someone wants to get into novel writing, you wouldn't say like, oh, well, just contact a publisher and be like, hey, hire me to write a book. Like you want to say like, make sure you understand what you're in for, and that you understand a little bit what the job is. That being said, there are game jobs for content, which are just around. It's not necessarily about building your own game. Like if you want to work, for a company, you can look around at game companies and look for jobs in content design, or writing, or creative writing, story in games. And there are some entry level-ish jobs that let you, that you could apply for. It's always good if you have samples, that you can send somebody. I wouldn't encourage anyone to write anything for a video game company on spec. It's just, if you have writing available, that's good. You can send them samples of like, here's what I can write, here's what I can do. I think a company that says like, well, hey, how about you write us a sample story with all these things is maybe, pushing it with what they, with what they're asking for. There are some other things you can do. There are some great tools for in games. It depends on like how you want to go with games. Games are broad, right? So there are games for for computers. There are games for consoles. There are games for handheld devices and phones. There are games that are 3D. There are games that are 2D, and there is still an interactive fiction community that's out there. And for those people in your audience who are, writers and authors who feel like they might want to do some video game writing, one way to showcase video game writing might be to work in interactive fiction. And there are some tools out there that are free and relatively easy to use. Some are easier than others. Twine is a web-based interactive fiction tool that's out there. Inform 7 has been around for a number of years. Inform 7 actually is kind of a favorite of mine because the source code for let me roll back slightly. So Inform is the language that Infocom used to make all of the text adventure games that they made throughout all of the 80s. So the adventure games that people know or may still have heard of, like Zork or The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the text adventure game, these were made using Inform. So Inform 7 is sort of a rewrite of the language meant to be like a natural language form of the language. So when you are building out an environment, you can say something like, the grand ballroom is a room. And then in quotes, you would write, a description of the grand ballroom, like the light cascades in through, whatever. And to the north of the grand ballroom is the hall. And then in quotes, you write, the hall has, portraits of rulers on either side, et cetera. And there's a something to the north of it. Those two sentences alone, you can run that, and when you go in, it says like you're standing, like you are in the ballroom, and if you type south, it'll say there's nothing to the south. But if you type north, it'll say you're now in the hallway. You're now in the hall, and it'll give you the description. And so it's something that's kind of accessible for writers, because the source code kind of reads like a short story or a book. And in fact, they even have it's organized into volumes and chapters and things like that you can do. And it handles most of the heavy lifting for things like, inventory management and navigation and stuff like that.
So if you find the stone, which you'll need later on, it remembers that the person found the stone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it handles all that inventory, and so that's something that's pretty useful as far as that goes. If it's more like building tools and sets. There are free game engines out there. This is getting pretty involved, like Unity. Unity 3D is a free engine that's out there, and that'll let you create games for basically every platform that's around. Whether it's you can write a game in Unity to run on like the Switch and a PlayStation 4 and a PC or a Mac or a Linux machine or an iOS device or an Android device or whatever it is you want. Much more involved and detailed, but there's a ton of good tutorial information up there on the web.
So there's probably a lot more like asset building for something like that too. Or
yeah, so the other thing is there are a lot of like asset bundles and packs and things like that are available too. If you're trying to make a game that you want to like put out there for the world and sell, then grabbing free assets and using them can work, but a lot of times people see those and they just assume it's low quality and it's poor. There's some great indie game communities like Itch, which hosts like game jams where people have like 48 hours to make a game or like a week to make a game, things like that. There are some those communities will allow you to maybe connect with other people who are interested in games at the sort of amateur level. I think if you want to get into video games, like you should also go into it with your eyes open. Like it is not a stable environment. It is an industry run off of successes that come very rarely out of like a big stream of like not very successful things. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do there. I would say make sure you know what it is you're getting into and what you want to do. Like everybody can say like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to wouldn't it be cool to be a ship captain? With no idea of the requirements of what it is to be a ship captain, or finding out that like being a ship captain sucks. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, I commercial fishing. That sounds amazing. I love fishing. Yeah, it's like the most dangerous profession around. Yeah, so like knowing what these things are, knowing what's there, I would say like a good way to get a sense of that is to go in there and try to make something, and start with the easy tools. If we're talking about world building specifically, then I think an old school text adventure is one of the quickest ways to sketch out a world and some interactivity, because it's not about building the world, right? It's about building a world that other people can interact with. And that's the that's the thing that differentiates a like a game from a book.
RPG Maker, I'm sure you use that a lot in your job, but
Yeah, no, RPG Maker is another tool that's
is that your classic JRPG kind of games?
Yep. Yeah, no, and that's a tool that's out there. There's one called Game Maker as well. But I would say, like, if you're gonna, do something that's about, worlds, it's probably something that, is going to end up being kind of like a role-playing game or like a text adventure game. And I would say the easiest way to sort of get a sense of how the world needs to work might be through just a text adventure, like a quick text adventure, through, even through Twine, which is all HTML based, I think. And then you can write that world, and you can write the characters, and you can come up with the interactions, and, and see if it works, and see if it's for you. Like, see if you like ceding authority to your player, or whether you want to hold it all to yourself. My writing partner doesn't like role-playing games, basically for this reason.
Because players make decisions?
Yeah, he likes to have control of what's happening in the world, and to be able to make sure that the moments that happen, instead of
create a vision and share a vision, as opposed to allowing the character more agency.
And it's just a different thing. And he made video games too. So, like, video games he's fine with, but it's something like a role-playing game where you get in there and you're doing all of this work to build this world and characters and environments, and then other people come in and they may not interact with them in the way that you thought they did, because in tabletop it's totally freeform. Like, I can put the detective in front of you at a murder scene that you're walking by, and you guys can just keep walking and be like, yeah, we don't want to get involved in any of that. And I'll be like, but that was my whole adventure. You were supposed to go and help the detective, and he was supposed to ask you just one more thing.
I love a good Columbo reference.
Well, that's a double inside reference. So,
yeah. You had your true neutral Columbo.
My true neutral Columbo. Yep, most definitely. Because I love the Columbo TV show.
Yeah, actually, my wife and I owned the whole. We found the box set for cheap, and we bought it.
Like that for everything.
Everything, including the Mrs. Columbos, which aren't technically Columbo.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not really Columbo.
As long as he doesn't show up on it, it wouldn't be fair if he was on that show.
Oh yeah,
I don't think I ever saw her on his show.
No, she was never there, right? And they actually backed away, and they sort of like changed who she was, and they sort of stepped away from her being Mrs. Columbo a little bit, I guess, in the series a little bit. But she was played by Kate Mulgrew, or Captain Janeway.
Yeah. Oh, very good. All right, so I'm going to have to cut it off here. Thank you so much for your insight. Just in general, for all of it. So
just for rambling along.
And so I know my audience all loves it. So because I actually made my avatar, my show, me 5 years ago. So it's very easy getting into the mind of what he would like to listen to. Even though I do have a lot of women who listen, so I can't really explain that. But it shows the power of Avatar.
There you go.
Thanks so much for being here, Jim.
Yeah, sure. This is pretty cool. I'll probably listen to a few more episodes. Yeah. I downloaded.
Maybe at some point we'll actually have you on for just randomly in the future or whatever. If you're ever feeling bored, want to come on, we'll fit into whatever topic we're doing and add it to your brain.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. It sounds fun.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.